Good evening to you. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening to you. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening to you. Good evening. Good evening to you. Good evening and welcome to Daring Dialogues. I'm your host tonight, Shantae Charles. I hope that you have been having a great and wonderful day. On last night, I dropped a couple of bonus episodes onto our podcast. So if you're interested in going to check out those bonus episodes from two very well-known people in the world right now, I won't tell you who they are, but go check it out on the podcast. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised if you want to hop on over there to check those out. The bonus episodes is anchor.fm/daring dialogues. I am going to be brief tonight because I am back training teachers for my state. So I do have a presentation that I have to give tonight. So I will not be as long as we normally are, but we are going to go at least to a half hour tonight. So I'm going to spend probably about maybe the first 15 minutes reading. We have some inventors I want to get to, and then if we have more time, I will share the arts and entertainment people. But if not, you can catch up with it on tomorrow. We'll still be here sharing. Tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we'll be continuing to share these iconic figures. So we're going to start tonight again with the Inventors. We're actually going to finish up this book. It's called What Color is My World? The Lost History of African American Inventors by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And we are finishing up with the last three inventors in this book, and that is Alfred L Crawl, the very first one here tonight. He was born in 1866 and he lived until 1920. Again, welcome into the live broadcast, and thank you to those who are faithful listeners, faithful supporters of what we do here, and also those of you who will catch the replay. If you want to get in on what we do year round as far as support and private sessions and just community building, you can join us at patreon.com/daring dialogues. There you can become a year-round sponsor. Alfred Crawl invented the ice cream scoop. Believe it or not, Americans eat an average of 26.4 pounds of ice cream and other frozen dairy products per person every year. The most popular flavors are vanilla, chocolate, butter pecan, and strawberry. Now, I am a mint chocolate chip fan myself, but there you have it. Those are the stats on ice cream. Inventing fancy electrical stuff is cool, but here's an invention that speaks to the heart and stomach: the ice cream scoop. So simple you'd think that whoever invented ice cream would have thought of it the very next day. Yet, it took a black hotel porter, that's the guy who carries the guest luggage, to come up with it. Alfred L Crawl was working in Pittsburgh when he noticed how hard it was to dig frozen ice cream from its containers. The poor slob doing the scooping usually had to use both hands and a couple of utensils, and still the ice cream would stick to everything. Crawl was 30 years old in 1897 when he received his patent for the mechanical ice cream mold and disher, which is still the same basic design used all over the world more than 100 years later. We have one in our kitchen drawer as well. The next inventor, Lonnie Johnson. You probably know him more than you probably know some of these other inventors. Lonnie Johnson is still alive, and he was born in 1949. He is the inventor of the Super Soaker. Now, I've got a story about the Super Soaker that takes me back to my high school days. I remember the last day of high school, and people were walking around our campus with Super Soakers, only they didn't have water inside of the Super Soakers. They had, what was that stuff called? It removed your hair, and I think it started with an N. I can't remember what it was. But anyway, they were spraying that on people through the Super Soaker, and people's hair was coming out on the last day of school. So, yeah, what a way to end the end of the school year. So people were running all over the place like they did not want to get hit with this stuff. But I forget, it was like, I don't think it was bait, but it was something else. But it was liquid, and you could spray it through the Super Soaker, and it was a hair removal Nair. That's what it is. Yeah, they put Nair in their Super Soakers, and they were spraying people in the hair with Nair, and their hair was coming out. I will never forget that.
Never.
Not intended, not what the Super Soaker was intended for, people. But more than 200 million Super Soakers were sold in its first 10 years of production. Almost 1 billion worth of Super Soakers have been sold since 1992. In 2015, the Super Soaker was inducted into the National Toy Hall of Fame. Now, this is the visual rendering of Lonnie Johnson. All right. Not every invention has to be something practical. Sometimes an invention can change the world by making it a whole lot more fun. That's what happened when a nuclear engineer named Lonnie Johnson created the Super Soaker in 1991. It would be hard to find a kid in America who hasn't played with one at least once. So that tells you, I graduated in 1995 from high school. So the Super Soaker was like a pretty big deal and pretty new when I graduated high school. Lonnie Johnson grew up in Mobile, Alabama, and went to Tuskegee University. When he's not designing the coolest squirt guns of all time, he's inventing other stuff, like the Johnson Thermoelectric Energy Conversion System, which is a system that provides a more efficient way to use heat to generate energy. Basically, this could be the hope for more widespread use of solar energy. Right now, solar energy systems only convert about 30% of solar energy into electricity, which makes it more expensive than burning oil or coal. But Lonnie's invention raises that efficiency rate to more than 60%. I know this invention is probably a lot more important than the squirt gun, but hey, we all want to have some fun. And again, here is the picture rendering of Alfred Crawl, the ice cream scoop inventor. And now we get to the last person in our invention book, and that is Garrett Morgan, an inventor and a hero. Garrett Augustus Morgan was born near Paris, Kentucky on March 4th, 1877, the seventh of 11 children. His mother was the daughter of a minister. His father was a who was formerly enslaved, whose own father was a white slave owner named John Hunt Morgan. During the Civil War, Garrett's grandfather, J.H. Morgan, joined the Confederate Army and was killed by Union soldiers. Morgan's death freed Garrett's family from enslavement. 12 years later, Garrett was born. Now, Garrett's parents were sharecroppers. They farmed land they didn't own and only kept a portion of the crop. It was a very hard life. Generally, children started working on the farm when they were 5 or 6 years old and went to school only a few months a year. When Garrett was 14, he had to make a choice: stay in Kentucky and work the land, or try his luck in the North. In 1891, Morgan found work as a handyman and continued his education by hiring a tutor to teach him proper English and grammar. When he turned 18, he moved to Cleveland, Ohio, with only 10 cents in his pocket. He eventually found a job sweeping floors for $5 a week in the garment district and later became a sewing machine adjuster for two companies that made women's clothing. Morgan quickly became known as the man who could fix any machine. He also created various parts for the sewing machines, making them faster and more efficient. In 1907, Garrett Morgan, now 30 years old, started his own business selling and repairing sewing machines. 2 years later, he started a tailoring shop that had 32 employees. The company made clothing with the machines that Morgan built. Both businesses proved successful, and he got married, had children, bought his own home, and became the first African American in Cleveland to own an automobile. But that wasn't enough. He couldn't help but look around to see how to improve the world. In 1912, Morgan patented his Morgan safety hood and smoke protector, which he designed to protect firefighters. His invention won several gold medals and was cheaper, lighter, and easier to use and wear than anything else on the market. Despite this, many fire companies refused to buy the device because a black man had invented it. Can you imagine not being willing to save your own life because a black man invented something that you don't want to buy? To counter this prejudice, Morgan had a white friend pose as the inventor while Morgan posed as a Native American demonstrator of the hood. This is a sketch of the safety hood that was designed for firefighter use. In 1916, an explosion in an underground tunnel under Lake Erie trapped 32 men. The rescue seemed impossible. Several men died in their attempts, and no one else was willing to try again. Then Morgan was called in. He and his brother put on the hoods and led a party to save the men. When newspapers later reported the successful rescue, Morgan's safety hood was ordered by fire departments nationwide. Another time, Morgan saw a horrific street accident which led him to innovate a three-position traffic signal that helped to prevent accidents, which he patented in 1923. This is a traffic signal designed for intersections of two or more streets. He also invented hair care products, though quite by accident. While working on making sewing machine needles to operate better, he experimented with various chemicals. He wiped one of the chemicals onto a rag and noticed that the curled threads of the rag had straightened. He called over his dog, a curly-coated Airedale, applied the chemical solution to its coat, and was amazed to see the dog's fur begin to straighten. Then he put some on his own hair, and it too straightened. In 1913, Morgan founded the G.A. Morgan Hair Refining Company to market his hair straightening cream, hair dye, hair oil, and various combs. Garrett was briefly married as a teenager and waited until he was 31 to marry again, this time to seamstress Mary Ann Hassick. Mary was white, and both their families opposed the marriage. Despite this, the marriage proved to be a happy one, lasting 55 years and producing 3 children, 3 sons. In 1943, Morgan was diagnosed with glaucoma, an eye disease that eventually led to 90% blindness. But he continued to innovate, invent, and remain active in helping the Black community. His contributions have been repeatedly honored by naming public places after him, including an elementary school in Chicago, a public school in Harlem, a water treatment plant in Cleveland. Even the section of his hometown where he was born, Claysville, was renamed Garrett Morgan Place. And in 1991, he was inducted into the Ohio Science and Technology Hall of Fame. Garrett Morgan passed in 1963 at the age of 86, leaving behind a family that loved him, a community that admired him, and a world that is greatly improved because of his inventions and innovations. So, this does conclude What Color is My World? Again, this book can be purchased wherever books are sold, but I like the setup of this book because it does have a narration in between of a brother and a sister that's talking about these inventors. All I did was I just pulled out the inventors, but it is actually a full story where the children are talking amongst themselves about all of these inventions and how they came to be. So that is my 15 minutes. If you would like to respond to any of the inventors that you've heard about tonight, if you are on IG, you can click the camera and I will bring you in. We have about 10-15 minutes to share on tonight. And if you are listening by Anchor on our podcast, I want to thank you for your time and attention. This has been another episode of Daring Dialogues, and I hope to see you back on tomorrow. Take care and be blessed. Good evening.
Good evening.
How are you?
I want to run through these real quick.
Go ahead.
Alfred L Crawl, ice cream school. Simple.
Very simple.
No degree. Hotel porter. Black man.
Yep.
Lonnie Johnson, super sucker. I remember that. But in today's world, if somebody squirted them with Nair, they would have tried to sue super sucker.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean that was I could imagine that though. Nair. And that's what I meant to write the first time, but somehow it just put in there bait. I looked at it as bait.
No, I was thinking in my mind, was it Nair? I couldn't remember what it was specifically, but I knew it was an N word. And the school I was at was predominantly white and Ashkenazim. And they were the ones with the super soakers spraying it at people. I'm just saying. That was a time before we had school resource officers on campuses. But you can imagine in this day and age, bringing a super soaker to school full of Nair and spraying it on people. You're probably going to be arrested. But back then, it was a new tool. It was only like 4 years out. And people thought, oh, this is a water gun fight, until it hit their skin and it started burning. And they realized this is not water. This is hair removal product. Because I saw like one guy, he like reached behind his head and he saw his hair in his hand. You could see him like, oh my God, my hair. And so when we saw that, everybody just took off running. Like, do not have time today to be going home your senior year at the end of the school year, to be going home with patches in your head for the summer. That's not good.
Yeah. And I went to Tuskegee and I heat to generate energy.
Yeah. Well, you saw the video clip I sent you guys last week about how they're talking about all the wonderful things that melanin can do. I said, I told you they shooting us out into the space. I told you. I said, I know what the Holy Spirit told me they doing with the bodies. Now they're just coming out. Now they're just coming out and sharing a little bit more. But I'm like, yeah, this is where all the missing people are going, because y'all are extracting energy.
And Garrett Morgan. When you say Garrett Morgan, I'm just, okay, where do I remember that name from? Then when you went through the helmet, because I went through a firefighter academy.
Okay.
See, so that's something that I knew, but I was trying to, okay, where do I remember that name from? So yeah, save your life. You don't want to buy it because he's black. Makes perfect sense.
But the sad part about that is there are still people right now in 2022 who will not buy certain things from black people, even if it will save their life.
Yeah.
Like that attitude is like still around. Like nothing has changed.
And also now his bringing that helmet into play also had a lot to do with scuba gear, because that was actually taken from that, because once he did that, they went into the carrying breathable packs for firefighters, and all from that it took also into scuba diving apparatus.
Wow.
So,
the good thing about the good thing I like about these particular inventors is all three of them have their own patent. Like it's almost like you can start kind of seeing the progression of inventors realize I need to make sure I own my patent, because so many of the earlier ones did not. And therefore their families are not collecting that residual from that. So I look at, here we are, it's a little bit further in time, and it's like, yeah, and he patented this in such and such. So that was good to read.
Right. And the traffic signal and hair care products. Now that ties into the super soaker.
Yeah.
Hair care products. But now, could you imagine if he had invented now?
Oh my gosh.
But now I'm going to tell you what I get from this. Okay, I can sum this thing up in one little package. Because Garrett Morgan, he looked around to see how he can improve the world. Right, which is basically what all these black inventors did.
Yeah.
They tried to come up with the way, and even some by accident, to improve the world. But yet we got these group of people that say they're lazy, they're savages, and they're the ones trying to destroy the world.
It just makes
just saying.
It just makes no sense that there's all this evidence out here contrary to what your mindset is. And you're just bent on this one narrative about black people. To me, that never made sense. Because even if you don't want to hear me, right? If you don't want to come on for the entire month of February and listen to me read about all these iconic people, inventors, history makers, all of that, you don't even want to hear me, there's enough source evidence and information out there that you can look yourself and read through.
Oh, listen.
So there's no excuse in 2022 to be ignorant. None.
I went there today, Shante, on again one of the Dolphin fan club pages.
Oh boy.
Where people are still talking that ignorant stuff. And I said, listen, I played football and I was a head coach of a team. I worked with quarterbacks and receivers, running backs. I had a great offensive line coach, well experienced. So I know what I see when I'm looking at a football game. I know the responsibility of each player there. I know when their job is not being done, and I know how it affects the play. But they're throwing their opinions out there. I ran all that down to them, and I said, listen, there's no, I said, you give people that are on here are giving their ignorant opinions. I said, but there's nothing wrong with being ignorant. It just simply means you don't know. Well, the problem is that when you don't do anything about your ignorance. And I told this one guy, I said, please study, do your research, and then come back and talk to me. See, and then a whole bunch of people jumped on that. Facts, because I told them use a fact. They came back with emojis like facts and loving it and all that stuff. So I know he really felt bad because people were backing up what I was saying, but too many people are coming on with opinion. And that's supposed to trump the fact? No, it doesn't.
Someone said something the other night, and I'm gonna see if I can find it, because I think it was very important what they said. It wasn't on this particular subject, but it was something in general. Let me see if I can find it really quickly, because it was to me it was so profound, and I don't call things profound often.
Right. If it was profound, it's profound, as you said.
That's not a word I throw around
No.
when I'm talking about things. But let me see if I can find this. It was in a group that I'm in. It's a private group, and I don't want to mess up her words, so that's why I'm trying to go find the actual statement she said. I like to quote people verbatim when I can find the quote. So she found this book called Your God is Too White. And I was like,
Wow.
that title sounds somewhat familiar. And she said, I found this book 6 years ago in a bookstore for 50 cents. It's an original 1970 print of a book that was re-released in 1981 under the name What Color Is Your God? Black Consciousness and the Christian Faith. I was like, oh, I have that book. I have that book because when I was in college, I started doing some digging into just Egypt and Africa and Black consciousness. And I was sitting under a professor at the time. A lot of people know him, Dr. Naeem Akbar. And I was privileged to actually get in his class because I was a freshman, but the class was only open to seniors. And I was like, I don't care. I'm going to get in this class. And so I went like early in the morning and I sat in his class and I was like, please let me in. And so I stayed the whole class, and he was very kind. He was just like, listen, this class is only for seniors, but if somebody drops, I'll put you in. And that's how I got into the class. And I'm so thankful that I got in as a freshman because it really opened my eyes to a lot of stuff. And I started my journey of studying earlier than had I been a senior taking that class. And so when she said that, I was like, I got that book because this was one of the first books that I bought because somebody was actually talking about God and race and color. But then she said this. She said, it's a great introductory level reading into racial oppression throughout the history of the American church. And then this was the profound thing she said. She said, why are we doing so much work reinventing the wheel and doing scholarship work that's already been done on race? Why don't we know more about the great works that are already out there from 1900 to 1990? I said, girl, you better preach up in this thing right here. And then someone else responded by saying, what's crazy is how ignorant and arrogant I was, not understanding how well informed, how theologically well-rounded, and how vocal the Black church has always been regarding race before reading this book. And I say, that reminds me of, again, when you don't know, when you don't teach, when you don't share with your children what has already been done, then when people come behind and create something based off of what the originals were creating, you think, wow, look at those people. They're so smart and we're not, which is an absolute delusion. But if you don't know, you don't know. And so I thought that was very, very powerful, to make sure that we're not reinventing the wheel. We have so much biblical history. We have so much history on inventors and all of these things out here that we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to go back and study our own history. Go back to our own historians like Lerone Bennett. When I was in college, I got Lerone Bennett's book on the history of Black people in America. Amazing book. But you don't hear people talk about him anymore now. You hear Henry Louis Gates. But before Henry Louis Gates, there was Lerone Bennett, and he was thorough. And I do mean thorough. So, I think that's a good point for us to kind of close on tonight. Like you said, there are people out here who are experienced. There are people out here who know the facts. There are people out here who know their stuff. And we have to stop bypassing scholars and experts and people who have experience in the field just because we want to look to something that's a little newer or fresher. We got to stop reinventing the wheel. Look at the scholarly work. Look at the experience of others that's already out here and really deal with that. Last thing, I got into a sort of a back and forth with someone on Twitter. Normally, I don't do that. I usually stay off of Twitter because the people on Twitter, to be honest, most of them are very argumentative. They're not looking for answers. They're looking for arguments in 180 characters. And I generally don't spend my day with that. But it was someone who was a person of color, but not a descendant of the enslaved. And they were trying to go back and forth with me about whether or not nationalism was something that, whether nationalists hide behind Christianity, because they felt like Christianity was, they felt like what's happening with Christianity is Christianity. And I'm like, no, what's happening is there are different types of Christianity. There's white nationalist Christianity. There is empire Christianity, like Constantinian Christianity. There is white supremacist Christianity. There is black church Christianity. And so to try to lump everything abusive that's happening under the term Christianity, I think is problematic. They didn't see it that way. And I'm like, it's okay if you don't see it that way. But I can tell you in my experience, the people that you're saying are Christians are not Christians. They're white supremacists and nationalists hiding behind the title Christian. Just like the Klan. The Klan calls itself a Christian organization, and anybody in their right mind know they not Christian.
Listen. I have some white friends that would agree with you 100% because they know. Their eyes were open.
Yeah.
See?
So I was like,
we have some mutual friends on Facebook whose eyes are open, white people.
So I was like, we don't need to call them Christians. Like, I know it's some bad stuff happening in Christianity. I get that. But white nationalism is a religion. White supremacy is its own religion. And so you don't need to lump what they're doing together and call that Christianity, because it's not. Now, I didn't go into the fact that I've been studying this for about 20 years, because I said, there are certain conversations that people are trying to have in 180 characters that need a whole seminar.
Right.
They need a week of seminars, because that's how much that you need to go into it to actually get people to understand. Just like, the whole debate with, we are the church. We're not the church. But people continue to say that. Why do they continue to say that? Well, that's a whole seminar in and of itself. Right? It's a whole seminar in and of itself, because there is a connection to the papacy and a connection to the bishopric, and based on how that was taught in those systems, that's what they pass on to their parishioners. That's why that misnomer keeps going, because those bishops keep teaching it and keep saying it, even though they know it's not true.
Listen, and you hit it on the head, because there was a pastor that I was associated with. I would teach that we are not the church. I would teach about the church being a building or an institution. And well, no, we are the church. We are the church. But she had this bishop. She had this bishop And I know that's where that was coming from.
I have plenty of friends who are bishops. They still teach that. I'm like, it'd be helpful if you would stop teaching that. But I know based on how you've been taught, you're not going to stop.
Right.
So because you're not going to stop, I'm going to keep reiterating that ecclesia and church are not the same word. All you have to do is go to the etymology of both of the words, and you will see they have a different word root origin, and they have a different word root meaning. And then all you have to do is go pick up an art history book, and it will explain to you how we came into these basilicas, because that's what they were called. So I said to myself, you know, I'm probably going to just do an actual seminar of maybe about 30 to 40 minutes. I'm going to pre-record it, and I'm going to put it on my page because I'm tired of having this conversation over and over and over again. I'm just going to drop the link where it has the visuals, and it can show you, and I can explain in detail how we got from Basilica being the building to where we are today. Because it really need people need to really understand, like, these spaces were meant to be pilgrimage spaces where you were just passing through. You came there on a pilgrimage to pay honor to those who had been martyred. You went into the basilica on the side aisles. You went up to the front, and you took a look at the remains of the martyred, whether it was a head, a foot, the whole body, a veil, a shroud, and then you kept it moving. You didn't stay there. It was never meant to be a place where you sat down every single day of the week or once a week. It was never meant to be that. It was meant to be almost like how people use arenas today, where you go for an event, but people are not in there having events every day. That's what it was meant for. What we've turned it into, we've turned it into something different because that benefited the people who were in power. That's what happened. And so when I see people not admitting that, that is problematic for me, because I'm going to have a hard time trusting whatever else you say, because you won't get to the truth of how this thing was established and why it is the way it is currently.
Right.
So this is not something I'm making up. This is actually world history. It's in lots of art history books. All you have to do is type in the origin of the basilica, Constantine creates empire, St. Peter's in Rome, which was like the first initial basilica that was really dedicated to this. And then there's another basilica, or church as we call it today, that was built simply to house Mary's shawl. That's it. The whole building was built to house the shawl that the Virgin Mary wore. And people went to go see the shawl that she wore. It's called a relic. Okay, trying to drop some vocabulary terms on us tonight. It's called a relic. The head of John the Baptist is still available. It was put into two parts, but they finally put it back together, and it's in what's called a reliquary. Go look up, where is John the Baptist's head today? People were going to visit the body parts and what the remains were of the saints, or where they had been crucified, or where they had been buried. And those spots became pilgrimage grounds. Those spots became sacred grounds. And on those sacred grounds is where they built the basilicas on top. So St. Peter's is literally built on top of the place where it is believed that St. Peter's body lay. They aren't just named after a saint for no reason back then. Now we name stuff everything. But over there, the naming has to do with who they believe was crucified or martyred in that spot. So again, these are not things that we're just making up. These are historical facts for the people who keep saying that these people didn't exist and all of that. Clearly they did, because they actually built they built on top of where their bodies are supposed to be buried, or they house parts of their bodies or their garments. And the people during that time, up until this day, through the Catholic system, still go and visit those reliquaries. So I am over my time, but that's okay. I'm just a little bit over tonight. I want to thank you all for your time and attention. This has been another episode of Daring Dialogues, and I've been your host tonight, Shantae Charles. I hope that you will hit the rewind, share this video, go do some research on everything I've just said. You'll be able to find it. It's not hard to find. And thank you again for your time and attention. Remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness. So continue to go out and be what, Pastor Ben?
Light.
Be light. Take care, everyone, and God bless.